Hello everyone, my name is Ankit Jain. I welcome you all to my channel Tech Journey with Ankit. In today's session, we will be working on one of the mini projects in which we will be exploring the different components of the Salesforce, including the flows, Apex, as well as the LWC. Moreover, we'll also be doing the few admin stuff like creation of the custom object and uploading the data as well. I hope you will get the multiple learnings from this project. With that excitement, we can get started with the project now. So before we get started, in case you folks like to know more about me, you can definitely connect with me on the LinkedIn. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. And you can also join our Telegram channel where we discussed all the queries that you do encounter in your Salesforce journey. So what all the different things that we will be learning from this project? So in this project, basically, we will be creating one Lightning Web component in which we will be loading the external JavaScript with the name of chart.js. Again, that LWC component that we will be creating, we will be putting that LWC component inside the flow as well. So again, to summarize the different learnings, basically we will be creating the Lightning Web component to load the external JavaScript. After that, we will be creating the Apex class that we will be invoking from the LWC to get the data. And after that, the LWC component that we have created, we will be putting up on the flow as well. So all the basic concepts as well as the advanced concepts, that is the motive to cover in this small mini project. Again, before we get started, I like to show you what will be the output of this project and what we will be achieving by the end of this session. So we will be creating one flow. You can see that this is my first screen of the flow where I'll be taking the two inputs from the user, first start date and the end date. For example, here I am passing the start date as the 1st of September and the end date as the today's date. So what we will be doing in between that date range, what all the different expenses that has been occurred, I will be displaying that in the form of chart. So here if I go and click on the next, so this is how the chart will coming up based on the date range that we have provided. Again, it will show you what different expenses that has been done in between that time range. So this is a small component that we will be creating, but trust me, there will be a lot of learning in this mini project for you folks. So before we getting delayed, we can get started. Let's go over the different steps that we have to do in this mini project to get that done. So first thing that we will be doing here is we will be creating one custom object with the name of expense. In that custom object, we will be importing the data using the data import wizard. Again, I don't want to start from the scratch, so I will be using the recipes provided by the Salesforce. So we will be cloning few of the components from the LWC recipes. The components that we will be cloning here is the error panel component to display the error messages, lips chart.js component to render the chart on the Lightning Web component, and also we will be taking the static resources like the chart.js as well as the chart.js XML file as well. Once we have done with this basic groundwork, then we will be creating an Apex class to summarize the expense data. Next to that, we will be modifying the lips chart.js component that we have taken from the LWC recipes. In that component, we will be making an Apex call. We will expose this component to the flows as well. Moreover, we will do the modification in this component so that the component should show the data based on the inputs provided by the user. In the end, we will be creating the flow. Our flow will have the two screens. First screen will take the start date and the end date from the user, and the second screen will display the chart using the Lightning Web component. So I already shown you what is the final output that we're going to meet from this project. So we can get started with the very first step where we will be creating the custom object with the name of expense. So to get started, again, I am navigating to my org, navigating to the object manager and creating the first custom object or the only custom object in our mini project with the name of expense. So navigating to the new custom object here and putting the label here as the expenses. Again, here I am putting the record name as auto number. So I am putting here as the record name as the expense ID and taking the data type as an auto number. Here I am be putting exp-000 because I want the expense ID should be generated automatically and putting the starting number as 1. If you want to enable the additional functionalities, you can definitely go and do that. Here I am also creating the tab for this component as well. So taking the option of the tab and clicking on save. Next to that, here I'll be selecting the tab style. You can select any tab style, does not matter. After that, I'll be clicking on the next. I am keeping all the default settings. Ideally, you should change these settings whenever you are working for the business. But considering this is our learning project, I am keeping everything as default. I'm adding this tab into all the different applications that I do have on my org and clicking on save. So this is how we have created the custom object as well as the tab as well. Now the next thing that we will be doing here is we will be creating the multiple fields on that object. So the first field that I am creating here, it is of type picklist. So taking the option of picklist, clicking on next, giving the field label here as expense type, entering the different values. Again, I will share all these values with you, but for the time being here, these are the different values that I will be entering here, starting from the very first value, that is the travel, education, insurance, utilities, rent, entertainment, miscellaneous, as well as the food. I will put all these values in the video description as well. The rest of the things I am keeping it as default and creating that custom field quickly. Next custom field that I am adding here, it is of date type. And I am giving the label here for that field as the expense date. Clicking on next, again keeping everything as default, not making any changes there. And in the last, I am creating one more field of type currency in which we will be storing the amount of the expense. Here I go and put the expense amount. And again, keeping everything as default, clicking on next and clicking on next, and then save these changes. So this is how we have created this complete object as well as the added the additional fields as well. So our step 1 is done. Moving to the next step where we will be importing the data into the custom object. Again, to do that, I am navigating to the home, taking the option here as the data import wizard to import the data into our custom object, launching the wizard, selecting the custom object. In our scenario, it is expenses, adding the new record, selecting the CSV file. Again, I will share the CSV file, so do check out the video description for the CSV file details as well. Clicking on next. My data looks good, my mapping looks as expected. So here I go and click on next. All these 3 fields are mapped. CSV file is also selected. So take the option of the start import. And let's check the status now. So all the records has been processed and the 1000 records we have imported as well. Let's navigate to the org and check how the data looks like. So I am looking for the expenses tab here. Taking the option of all expenses. So this is how my all expenses are look like. After that, here let me go and add the few additional columns to display. So I am putting here the expense type, expense date, as well as the expense amount, clicking on save. So all the data that we have in our mock data file, it is uploaded here. Now the next thing that we will be doing here is moving to the next step where we will be cloning the LWC recipes repository. Again, to get this cloned as a prerequisite, make sure that you guys have the Git software installed on your machine. If you don't know how to install the Git, do check out the bootcamp as well. In the bootcamp, I have shown you how you can install the Git on your laptop or on your machine. So again, to get that cloned, what you have to do here is you have to navigate to this URL. Again, I will put this URL in the video description. You have to navigate to the code and copy this path. Another thing, if you don't want to follow this step, if you scroll down, they have provided here the detailed steps how you can get that cloned. So again, I want to only follow this step for now where I want to execute the cloning part. So I am copying this, opening the command prompt. Again, to do that, wherever you want to put this copied folder, you can navigate to that specific folder. Let's say In my scenario, I want to put it on my recipes folder. So this is the folder where I want to put it. So here, if you go and type the CMD, it will open the command prompt for you. One thing that you have to do here is you have to go here and paste that command that you have copied. Again, it will create the recipes folder for you. Again, it will take around a minute or two to create that recipes. Meanwhile, let's go over the deck and try to understand what all the next steps that we have to do. Once we have cloned that, these are the three components that we have to copy: error panel, chart.js, as well as the static resources. So we have to wait for a minute or two unless and until all the files are getting copied. Let's wait. Come here. Under the LWC recipes, we do have the Force app folder. Under the Force app, we do have the main. We do have the default. And this is where you will have all your folder structure. So if I navigate to the LWC, as I said, there are multiple components that we have to copy. Error panel. There is one more component that we have to copy that I missed to add in the deck. That is the LDS utils. So take that component as well, because this error panel component is dependent on the LDS util. So that's why we have to take that. And the next component that we have to copy is the lips chart.js, right? So I am doing the right click, copying all these three components, navigating back. Okay. Another thing that I already done as a prerequisite, I have my project already configured in my org, right? So this is my project. You can use any of your existing project, or you can definitely go and create the new project as well. How to create the project? I have created detailed videos in the bootcamp. I will also put that link in the video description, so you can check out from there as well. So under this, I am expanding the LWC folder, opening this in the Explorer. Right, this is how my folder structure will come up, and here I am pasting all these three files that I have copied from the recipe. So we are done with the step one, where we are pasting all these three files. Moving to the next thing that we have to do here is we have to also copy the static resource as well. So navigating to my recipes folder, from here, if I take the one step back, navigating to the static resources, this is the static resource that I have to copy: chart.js as well as the chart.js meta file. So I'm copying these two files as well. Again, going back inside my project, I am going to the static resources and pasting that too. So this step is also completed, where we have copied the components from the clone library and paste it as well. Now let's work on the project. So in my project, if you see, my static resources are available. Let's go and try to deploy the static resources first. So I'm doing the right click on the static resource folder and taking the option of deploy this source to the org. Next thing that I will be doing here is I will be deploying my LWC components as well. Again, to do that, the very first component that I am deploying here is the LDS util, because this component, another component that I do have error panel, it is dependent on the LDS utils. So make sure that you guys are deploying this component first. Followed by that, you guys can go and deploy the another component with the name of error panel. Right, so we have already deployed this two component. Now the next thing that we will do here is this lips chart.js component that we do have. Let's go and rename that component. So again, to rename that component, I am taking the right click and taking the option here as sfdx rename component, and I am naming that component here as the expenses chart.js. Okay, you can give any name, but make sure that you are following the naming convention and the first letter is the lowercase. So this is my component name, and I'm hitting the enter. By hitting this command, if you go and expand it, you will see that all the files inside that project structure is renamed. Only thing that you have to make sure that if you navigate to the class, this command, it is not renaming the class here. So you have to also go and rename this class as well. So again, I am pasting it. My class, it will always starts with the capital letter. So make sure that here you are putting the expenses chart.js, something like this. Okay, so this is how we have renamed this component. Again, if I come back, To this component, let me navigate to the HTML file. We will do some changes in the HTML file as well. First thing, I am changing the title. Here I am putting the title here as expense tracker. Next thing, I already have this. One thing we have to make sure that whenever we are modifying the HTML file in the JavaScript, we have to make sure that LWC DOM is equal to manual should be there. We already have this error panel component, so that part is also good. Again, I don't want to show any source code, so I am removing this section from my HTML file and saving my changes. Right? Another thing that we can do in this file is if I navigate to the XML file, as of now, this component is exposed to the pages as well as the community. But as I said, I also want to expose my component to the flow as well. So here I am navigating to the target, and here I can go and say that I want to expose my component to the lightning flow screen. Right? I have already covered a very detailed video how you can expose your component on the lightning flow screen. Do check out the bootcamp if you want to learn this advanced concept. Now, another thing that I have to do, as I showed in my demo as well, let me take you to the one more time. Whatever the inputs that user is giving on this flow, I have to pass these inputs to my Lightning Web component as well. So whenever we have to accept this kind of an input in our Lightning Web component, we have to go and define the properties. Again, rather than we go and write down our code from the scratch, let's take the help of the Google and see the syntax from the LWC documentation. So here I go and put expose LWC component to flow. Yeah, so this is the link, configure a component from the flow screen. I will also put this link in the comment section so that you guys can directly check out from there. Again, if you follow this, let me scroll it down. Here you guys can see that they are exposing this component to the flow screen, and to accept the different inputs, this is how we have to go and define the target configs. Rather than I go and start writing down, I'm directly copying this code and pasting it. I iterated this multiple times in the bootcamp. In LWC, it's always better to refer the documentation. You should be very smart enough to use the documentation rather than go and remembering all those syntaxes. Right, so here I'll be putting the target configs, defining the lightning flow screen. I only want the two types of input. One is the start date and second is the end date. So let me also go and remove this property as well. So here I go and define this property one more time and putting the name here as the end date. Sorry. Putting here the name as end date and giving the label here as the end date. So this is how we are defining this property. What is role? The role will identify that this fields that you are taking from here, it is only for the input purpose. So from the flow, you can only go and pass the value. Similarly, another roles that we do have is the output only, in which you can send the values from the LWC to the flows as well. In case you are not specifying the role, the default will be the both. But it's always a good practice to go and explicitly specify the role in your component. Now, again, these properties are something which needs to be exposed outside the LWC component. So as per the basic rule of the LWC, we have to go and define these properties and get it annotated with the @API decorator. So where is that? Yeah, so here let's go and define this property. One is the start date and another property here is my end date as well. Sorry, end date. And again, to get it exposed, we have to make sure that we are annotating with @API decorator. And as we are using the @API decorator, another thing that we have to make sure that we are importing the API decorator as well. Okay, so we have created this component which is accepting the two different inputs from the user, right? And displaying the chart as well. So for the time being, it looks good. Let's go and try to deploy this component as well. So this component is also deployed. Now let's go and create the flow, at least to check whether the static data is displaying correctly or not. So again, I'm navigating here into my org, navigating to the flows as well. From the setup menu, here I am looking for the flow. Navigating to the flows, creating the new flow. I'm creating the screen flow. So starting from the scratch, clicking on next, selecting the option of screen flow, clicking on create. So my first screen here is going to take the dates. So I'm adding the first screen. Here I am putting the date range as the label of my screen. And there are two date fields that I am adding here. One is the start date and second is the end date. So for the first one, here I'll be putting the start date and I'm making this as the required. Second one also I am putting here as the end date and making this one also as the required date. Okay, so I do have the start date and end date. Based on this date, we have to go and display the chart. So clicking on done, then I'll be adding the another screen, clicking on the screen one more time. And here I will be putting the custom component that we have created. So if you scroll down, it will show you the expenses chart JS component. So here I go and drag and drop this component as well. Right? As I said, this component is accepting two types of input, end date and the start date. This is how we have configured our component, right? So you can see these input options are available here as well. So here I go and specify the API name. Let's say here I'm putting the API name as expense tracker. The start end date I am passing from my screen, and the start date also I am passing from my screen as well. So this is how we have created the component where we are passing these different inputs. Let me go and define the screen properties as well. Here my screen property says expense summary. And after that, I am clicking on the done button. So let's go and save this flow. Expense summary flow and clicking on save. Before we go and activate this, let's go and click on the debug button to check whether this flow is at least displaying the static data or not. So if I come here, click on the run button, take this first option, or let me go and take some older date here from 2020, 1st September. Again, as of now, the date does not matter because we are putting the static data and clicking on the next. So at least you can see that my chart is coming up, but my chart as of now, it is showing me some static data, right? Which is coming up from the default component that we are having from the lib.js component here. Right now, the next thing that we have to do here is we have to make sure that this data is coming up dynamically. And that's what we will be exploring in the part 2 of this video, where we will see how we can populate this chart data dynamically now. I hope you folks got few learnings from this session. Do let me know in the comment section if you found this project helpful or not. Thank you. Have a good time.